It's kind of amazing when you stop and think about it. A place, smaller than many big cities we know, but it's one of the wealthiest spots on Earth.
It really is quite something.
So today we're doing a deep dive into Macau. We're going beyond the usual headlines. We've gathered a whole bunch of sources, really interesting stuff to trace its story
Uh-huh.
from its, well, fairly quiet start all the way to the glittering place it is now. The goal here is simple. Pull out the really key stuff, the compelling bits, and give you a solid grasp of how Macau became Macau without all the fluff.
Exactly. And the sources we've got cover a huge span. We're talking early settlements, the whole Portuguese colonial period, its role as this major trade hub,
Right.
the cultural mixing, the Japanese occupation, and then bringing it right up to today as a special administrative region of China.
So we want to connect the dots for you, show the big shifts, maybe some surprising facts along the way, and
Yeah.
really answer what made Macau so unique.
That's the plan, unpacking its distinct history and character.
Okay, let's jump in then. Think mid-16th century. 1557, the Portuguese show up. Macau wasn't exactly a metropolis back then.
No, far from it. Very sparsely populated, mostly. And crucially, it wasn't like some other places the Portuguese encountered, or even major Chinese cities at the time.
How so?
Well, you didn't have a big fortified Chinese city there, compared to, say, the Spanish approach of building a planned walled ciudad, or cities like Tianjin or Ningbo, which had strong defenses. Macau was different.
So the Portuguese didn't build a big fort right away?
Not in that initial phase, no.
Yeah.
It was more about securing a defensible spot that was, well, relatively empty. This lack of a strong fortified core from the get-go actually shaped their relationship with China quite a bit.
Made it less confrontational, maybe. More collaborative, even if tense.
Sort of, yeah. A different dynamic than just outright conquest. But the Chinese authorities were definitely watching closely. They weren't thrilled about foreigners building potentially permanent structures.
I bet. The idea of a foreign wall on their doorstep.
Precisely. In fact, that fear actually prompted Beijing to build its own defensive wall nearby to keep an eye on things. And there was friction early on.
Like what?
Disputes over taxes, particularly involving traders from Kowloon. And there were these local Chinese offices, the Wong offices.
Yes, you mentioned those sort of customs posts.
Basically, yeah. And there were accusations of, bribes being paid there. It points to the competing interests right from the start.
And Beijing tried to clamp down?
They did try to reassert control, but those attempts didn't really stick.
Why not?
It seems they couldn't get enough buy-in from the locals. Not enough popular support for Beijing's efforts at that time.
Interesting. So the Portuguese settlement just kind of grew.
Pretty organically, yeah. Not super planned out initially. It started up north on the island, then gradually spread to the mainland. Eventually, they did start centralizing things south of the main hill.
And thinking about fortifications.
Yes, preparations began, and even the bishop was apparently on board with fortifying the place.
And alongside this physical growth, there's the whole religious dimension starting up too.
Absolutely. Even before the Portuguese, you had important local temples, like the Amma Temple, dedicated to Mazu Po, the sea goddess. Still there today, it's ancient.
Right?
Then the Christian missionaries arrive, Jesuits in 1559. And you start seeing the first European-style churches popping up.
Simple ones at first.
Yeah, adobe initially. But soon they started building with brick and stone. That's when you get the foundations laid for those iconic Baroque churches, like St. Paul's.
The ruins everyone knows.
Exactly. That started around 1587. And St. Dominic's also around that time. You see this blend starting right there.
So this early period really set the stage for Macau's whole identity, that mix of cultures, that somewhat unplanned development.
It really did. It's quite different from a lot of other colonial beginnings.
Okay, let's pinpoint it on the map for everyone. South coast of Guangdong province, near Guangzhou, near Hong Kong.
And critically, right at the mouth of the Pearl River, the Zhejiang. That position made it just incredibly important as a gateway.
For trade between mainland China and Southeast Asia.
Exactly. And, for a long time, it was effectively China's main window to the outside world, that sustained direct contact point.
And that unique geography and history you're saying, that's also linked to why it became the gambling center.
It's all part of the same story, yes.
Right.
That specific mix of factors created the conditions for it to become China's only legal gambling city.
Which obviously brought huge wealth.
Immense wealth, though our sources do note the central government in Beijing is pretty cautious about, letting it grow unchecked.
And then the big handover in 1999, one country, two systems.
Right. Which guarantees Macau a high degree of autonomy. theoretically,
Hmm.
maintaining its own systems, legal, economic, social, for 50 years.
But there are questions now about how that works in practice.
Well, there's certainly public discussion, yeah. Concerns raised about the real extent of that autonomy in recent years as part of the ongoing narrative.
Let's go back to trade, because that's how Macau really took off. You mentioned an informal market.
Yeah, in the 1550s, merchants from Fujian looking for quick profits. And the Portuguese kind of let it happen.
Just let them trade.
Pretty much, yeah, with one big condition. Don't mess with our internal security. And that turned out to be a really smart move for Portugal, actually.
How so?
Because Macau just transformed from that small market to a proper European settlement, a major trading hub, a key transshipment point.
Transshipment, meaning goods passing through.
Exactly. Especially after 1573, when the Spanish took the Philippines. Macau became crucial for moving New World silver into China, where it was in huge demand.
Silver from the Americas going through Macau to China. Wow.
Yeah. And then in 1586, it gets formally labeled a Portuguese city. This was under Felipe II of Spain, who was ruling Portugal too at the time.
And it could defend itself.
It could. It successfully fought off attacks from those big Spanish Manila galleons we mentioned earlier,
Right?
which just cemented its reputation as a safe place to do business, a reliable hub.
So its role in the age of exploration was pretty significant.
Undeniably. First as a stopover for the Japan trade, then leased from the Ming Dynasty in 1557, becoming this permanent base.
An international free port.
Yes, and a launching pad for Catholic missions into China and beyond.
And this is where real, sustained Sino-Portuguese relations begin.
It is. And interestingly, there was also this period where intellectuals were leaving the Ming court.
Due to instability?
Yeah, and the Portuguese were apparently quite savvy in using the knowledge and connections these individuals brought.
So by the 1600s, Macau is really established.
Oh, yeah. Asia's first permanent European settlement. Basically the best, maybe the only, major port for Christian Europe in the East, all running on that incredibly profitable China trade.
And all this interaction must have led to serious cultural mixing.
For sure. You see close ties with the Philippines developing early on, 16th century, people moving back and forth, goods.
In Japan, too, you mentioned Francis Xavier.
Yes, the famous Jesuit missionary. His arrival was a big deal, though it also made some Portuguese merchants nervous.
Worried he'd upset the trading relationship.
Potentially, yeah. So there were always these negotiations, these complexities around both the trade and the missionary work. It wasn't always smooth sailing.
Okay, let's jump forward a bit. 19th century. Opium.
Right. A darker chapter, but historically important. Until about 1840, Macau was the main entry point for opium into China.
Mostly brought in by British traders.
Largely, yes. Shipped from India. They'd store massive amounts in warehouses in Macau, run by the Portuguese.
And then ship it onward into China from there.
Exactly. And interestingly, when the Chinese Imperial Commissioner Lin Zexu started his crackdown in Canton.
Trying to stop the trade.
Right. Macau wasn't really affected much, initially.
But eventually.
Well, the emperor's decree banning opium was eventually published in Macau in 1839. After that, the opium trade did decline noticeably.
But it didn't stop completely.
Oh, no. Covert dealing definitely continued on a large scale.
Okay, shifting gears again. World War II. That must have been a tense time.
Extremely. Japan invades China, bombs Hong Kong. Macau declares neutrality.
And did that hold?
For a while, remarkably. But in January 1942, Japanese forces just walked in. No resistance from the Portuguese.
So they were occupied.
Yes, until the end of the war in 45.
Yeah.
But the sources describe it as a relatively mild occupation compared to other places.
Why mild?
Since Japan wanted to maintain the fiction of Macau's neutrality, so the Portuguese kept their civil administration going.
But Japan was really in charge.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
They controlled the police, the military functions, and there were definitely restrictions. Strict press censorship, for example, impacting Portuguese culture.
Okay, post-war. Things change again. An economic slump.
Yeah, tough times after the war. Casinos closed. Then the government tried to regulate gambling more formally.
And that caused problems.
It did. Led to conflicts with some of the established gambling bosses, figures like Zhang Kong and Sam Keong. They actually challenged the government's authority.
But the government pushed through with regulation?
Well, actually, going back a bit, the state monopoly on gambling was put in place earlier, mid-19th century, under Alfredo de Albuquerque.
Ah, okay. So that made gambling an official revenue source for the colony.
Precisely. But the really transformative moment for the modern industry was 1961.
Stanley Ho.
That's the one. He got the official government gambling concession. And he invested massively. really changed the game.
And that's when Macau's fortunes really started to boom.
Absolutely. Huge prosperity followed. Tourism took off alongside gambling, too,
And Ho had that monopoly for decades.
until 2002. Then the market opened up. Foreign casino giants rushed in.
And that led to the massive expansion we see now.
Exactly, turning Macau into the world's #1 gambling destination by far.
Which brings us closer to the handover era.
Right. All that rapid growth was happening in the lead up to 1999. The Sino-Portuguese Joint Declaration and the Basic Law set the stage.
Providing the framework for the transfer of sovereignty.
Yes, setting up the Special Administrative Region, the SARG.
And that handover ceremony itself was a huge symbolic moment.
Definitely. Marking the start of Macau's life under one country, two systems.
With that high degree of autonomy we talked about.
In principle, yes.
Yeah.
And the economic story since then has just been incredible. Exploding growth, making it one of the wealthiest places anywhere.
But not without issues.
No, rapid growth rarely is smooth. You have social inequalities widening, that constant push-pull between development and preserving heritage.
Protests and things.
Yes, various social and political protests have occurred. Plus, significant environmental worries. Air quality, noise, ecological damage from all the construction and tourism.
It's interesting comparing it to Hong Kong's handover.
Very different context. Our sources suggest Macau's return was seen more as Portugal handing it back, almost like a gift, rather than the result of, say, colonial wars or intense pressure like with Hong Kong. Different history, different issues.
And throughout all this, that unique culture kept developing.
Absolutely. That blend of East and West is everywhere. Architecture is a great example. St. Paul's ruins have Chinese motifs carved by Japanese craftsmen.
Wow.
Food, religion, festivals.
Yeah.
It's a real melting pot.
And parts of it are now protected. UNESCO World Heritage.
Yes, the historic center of Macau includes the Ama Temple, ruins of St. Paul's, Gia Fortress, among others. But lots of other heritage exists outside that official listing, too.
Is preserving it difficult?
It can be. You know, pressure from developers, political considerations, even natural disasters pose challenges to keeping that heritage intact.
Yeah.
And just briefly, Macau pops up in popular culture, too, right? Often linked to...
Gambling, yeah. James Bond, The Man with the Golden Gun. Novels like Noble House.
Usually focusing on that casino world. But as we know, gambling's history there goes way back, long before the government got officially involved.
So wrapping this up, what stands out most? Macau's journey is just wild, isn't it?
It really is. From almost nothing to a vital trade port, a centuries-long colony, this incredible cultural crossroads.
Then the opium hub, neutral in WWII, and now this global casino capital and SAR.
And through it all, that blend of East and West, Portuguese and Chinese influences shaping everything, it's undeniable.
We definitely hit some of those aha moments, I think. Those surprising turns that explain how it got here. Hopefully this gives you a much clearer picture without needing to read dozens of books.
That's the idea, a shortcut to understanding this really complex and fascinating place.
So here's something to chew on. Given this incredible story, this transformation, what's next for Macau? How does it balance that unique identity, its history?
With its role as part of China, especially being so reliant on the gambling economy.
Right. And how does it keep hold of that precious cultural heritage amidst all the modern pressures?
It's a huge question. It's definitely something to think about as Macau continues to evolve.